Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. Well, we have Magistra Vitae, Fall of the Etruscans, History of Rome, Part 7. The Etruscans, of course, is this larger regional power of Italia, north of the Latin League, north of Rome. Um, they've kind of been, you know, sometimes allies, sometimes not allies, it seems, in the last bits of the earliest part of the Roman Republic. We'll see what happens today in this video. I'm expecting a full-on war, so we'll see what happens. Glad you're here. Hit that like button, and let's jump right in.
People watched in awe as 306 men of the Fabii clan marched out of the city. Rome was facing pressure from all
Jeez. Okay.
sides, so the Fabii family took the fight against Veii and the Etruscans on themselves. They decided to both finance and personally fight to protect the northern borders. Never in Roman history did such a small army receive such wide praise. For years, the Fabii were successful in repelling the Veientines. The mightiest town in Etruria didn't present a challenge for them, and they grew overconfident. In their arrogance, they marched carelessly over the enemy's territory when they were ambushed in the Battle of Cremera. Although they fought vigorously and almost turned the tide of the battle, they were overcome by the sheer force of numbers. It's said that all 306 Fabii were cut down on that day. Only one boy, too young to fight,
This seems like a legend, but we'll see.
survived to carry the family name. Fidenae was a trading outpost on the south side of the Tiber, founded by Etruscans. Control of this town brought with it control of the Via Salaria, or
Oh, it's just important route.
the Salt Road, and the trade along the river. During the regal period, Fidenae changed hands multiple times, but it was now firmly under Roman control. Seeing Rome embroiled in war with both Volscians and the Equi, Fidenae revolted and sided with Veii. For Rome, this represented an existential threat, and they had to retake the town. Backed by Veii, Fidenae was a fierce opponent and the war dragged on for years. Eventually, though, in 435 BCE, the town was recaptured and fell back under Roman control. This war left Rome in an unfavorable position. Exhausted and unable to defend itself, the city was easy pickings. Curiously, Veii didn't capitalize on this opportunity. Lack of any Etruscan attacks at this time would suggest that they were also dealing with some sort of internal pressures and were unable to act. The ultimate clash between Veii and Rome was inevitable. Salt beds at the mouth of the Tiber were a reliable source of revenue.
Of course, salt. Remember, salt's such a huge, important thing to preserve food. It's not just a spice. It's right where they're using it to preserve food. I'm pretty sure they were using it in other ways too, but that's a huge commodity here.
And neither city wanted to give it up. Arrival of the Volscians and subsequent disruption of the trade routes with Magna Graecia meant that only one economic hub could be sustained in this part of Italy. Finally, both cities were growing rapidly and had the need for more land. In Rome, the patricians wanted poor plebs out of the city, and the plebs just wanted some land to sustain themselves. In spite of all of this, an uneasy truce was signed between the two towns. In the last decades of the 5th century BCE, attacks from the Volscians and the Equi tapered off. Roman endurance finally prevailed, or perhaps famine and pestilence took their toll. In any case, the Romans finally managed to catch their breath. They had recovered both financially and militarily, and were again ripe for new conquests. When the truce with Veii finally expired, Romans looked for any excuse to deal with their unwanted neighbors. An insult from the Veientine Senate in 406 BCE was
Mamma
enough to start
mia!
a conflict that would see the end of Etruscan dominance in central Italy. The city of Veii was surrounded by cliffs from 3 sides.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You can't really penetrate that, can you?
A narrow passage on the north side was the only way in or out of the city, and that passage was heavily fortified. Veii proved to be unassailable, and the Romans were forced into a lengthy siege. In anticipation of the Roman attack, the city was sufficiently provisioned, and
I wonder, another tangent, I wonder how sieges really went way back then at this point. Like, did they still build siege towers, or is it just more like, let's starve them out?
able to endure the siege. The Romans had short campaigning seasons, as most of the soldiers were farmers who had to work their fields to survive.
Yeah.
When October rolled around, the Senate was unwilling to lift the siege and lose all progress. Instead, they took an extraordinary measure. Soldiers were given a salary for the first time in order
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So new precedents started.
to wage war year-round. The tribunes were outraged and refused to pay the war tax. But when the people saw senators happily paying their dues, nobody wanted to be seen in not supporting the army, and the tax was collected.
It becomes very patriotic to it.
This was the first step on a road leading directly to the death of the Republic.
I mean, you can say that, but I guess you can say that, but I mean, I don't see it as a detriment, right?
The Romans besieged Veii for years. Every direct attack was easily repulsed, and Veii was showing no sign of surrendering anytime soon. On numerous occasions, the Romans tried to build wooden ramparts that would allow them to scale the walls and defeat the enemy from within.
Okay.
But these efforts were thwarted by Veientine raiders, who would sneak out at night and burn the ramparts to the ground. The morale in the army began to waver. The salary was unable to keep the soldiers from sliding into poverty. Their farms, uncultivated for years, began to fall into disrepair.
Yeah, that's the hard things, and this is true all the way. I think it was either Tiberius or Gaius Gracchi would call this out in the future about the farms of soldiers, just the land being just monopolized and slave labor, and it just creates a void into despair for one's own personal wealth because of the life of a soldier.
In hopes of turning their fortunes around, the Senate appointed Marcus Furius Camillus dictator. Elected as a military tribune 3 times during this war, he proved himself as a capable military commander. He would be named dictator for the unprecedented 5 times. His legacy was so great that he was even proclaimed the second founder of Rome.
Watch out! Don't get too hasty with those titles.
But for now, his task was to bring this prolonged conflict to a quick end. Camillus knew that a direct assault on the city was impossible. Instead, he ordered his men to dig a tunnel beneath the city walls.
Oh.
The army was divided into 6 groups, and they worked around the clock, without intermission, until a tunnel was dug from the Roman camp to the temple inside the city. To avoid any suspicion, the Romans would periodically attack the city gates. When the tunnel was ready, a full-scale assault on the city began, whilst a small contingent of men was sent through the tunnel, with orders to open the gates from within. Watching the whole Roman army charging at their walls kept the Veientines from realizing what was going on. Once the gates were opened and the army poured into the city, it was all over.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Strategic. I would just think that tunnel would collapse. I guess they were pretty smart at mining, because they had their mining's definitely a thing at this time. So, and that's the thing about a lot of Roman soldiers, is they were multifaceted. They weren't just soldiers, and this makes perfect sense, right? Because the salary was just introduced, so they're farmers first. These people might also be miners. They might also be, just workers in general prior to this. So stuff like this seems secondhand to a lot of people.
Veii was razed to the ground and the population enslaved. A siege that lasted for years was brought to a close within 6 months of Camillus taking office.
Wow.
Although the official records state that the war lasted for 10 years, no doubt taking inspiration from Homer's Trojan War.
Yeah, also has some Trojan War-esque feel to it, like getting inside the gate somehow. Yeah. You never know. Like the parallels are very similar.
The historical records put the length of the conflict at 6 to 7 years.
Okay.
Returning victorious to the city, Camillus was granted a triumph. In his arrogance, he entered the city while riding on a chariot pulled by 4 white horses. This was one of the marks of the kings, and the people quickly turned against him.
See, I told you. Don't get too hasty.
The only thing that Romans hated more than their neighbors were kings. All of this would have been water under the bridge had he not made an even greater mistake. He announced that all soldiers were required to hand over 1/10 of the plunder,
Oh, brother.
which would be dedicated to the gods.
Oh.
Now even the army turned against him, and Camillus was banished from the city. It wouldn't be long before the Romans wished Camillus was back at the head of the army.
Ah, because they're gonna lose.
The Battle of Cremera, described at the start of this video, oddly resembles the sacrifice of King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. Perhaps some Roman authors wanted to show that the Greeks were not the only patriots, willing to give their life for their country. But one interesting bit of historical evidence does present itself. In the years before the battle, members of the Fabii family were often elected to serve as consuls and military tribunes. But in the years after the battle, there is a noticeable lack of any Fabii man holding office. This absence was stopped when the only surviving boy came of age and could finally hold office. Ruins of Veii remained hidden until aerial photos revealed a discolored patch of grass 10 or so miles north of Rome. Further archaeological excavations revealed a once mighty city that lay buried for 2 millennia.
Wow.
Interestingly, drainage tunnels were discovered beneath the city. Most of these were packed with rock and debris to block the passage. It's hard not to presume that the Romans found one of these tunnels, emptied it out, and stormed the city by surprise. The Etruscan
Interesting.
League was not a classical military alliance. It was more of a loose confederation of independent trading partners. Migration of Celts into the north of Italy put further pressure on the whole league. Rise of Syracuse in the south put pressure on Veii's ally Carthage, who was unable to send aid, and Veii stood alone against the might of Rome. Combination of these factors, with a sprinkle of Roman ingenuity, allowed them to prevail in this prolonged conflict. The Celts that settled in the Po Valley began to move further south. With Veii defeated, the road to Rome stood undefended. Join us next time as we discuss the destruction of Rome and its second founding.
Okay, yeah, I did not know about this. This is gonna be crazy. The Gallic sack of Rome is coming up. But this was an interesting one. Yeah, it does resemble a little bit of Troy, but in its own regard, I mean, with the archaeological evidence that he noted, it seemed like it was true. The Veii, and then it's just an interesting part of Roman history. It always seems that the leader of whomever is leading Rome just it just keeps getting hungrier. He just keeps getting hungrier for power, which is the just to its detriment a self-inflicted demise. But Rome is continuously just metastasizing power here. The Etruscan League is diminishing by way of migration and Latin influence, and it seems that the writing is going to be on the wall very soon that Rome is going to be the player here. However, it looks like they're going to have a hiccup coming up. But nevertheless, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you as always. I say that at the end of every video, but I really, really do mean it. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.